Hey, Tracy, thank you so much for coming on the virtual campground. We're so glad you are here.
Thank you for having me, Barry. I really appreciate that.
You're very welcome. So, let's talk a little bit about RV renovation. So, you are currently renovating a rig. So, tell us a little bit about it, year, make, and model, and all that fun stuff.
Glad to. It's a 1998 Catalina Coachman, and I got the idea back in 2018 to have it transported from Iowa to Arizona. And it's my parents, actually. And they had not been using it for a number of years. And I knew it had some water damage to it, but it ended up being a little bit more than that.
They always seem to be a little bit more than that, don't they? They can be tricky little renovation projects.
Yes, and water I have found travels in strange and mysterious ways. That is
Oh
for
my
sure.
gosh. Well, was the water damage the reason you started the renovation, or what was your motivation for doing a renovation in the first place?
In my regular life, I work at a captive auto finance company, and I was talking with a coworker about what she and her husband were doing with their RV fleet, and which was to you may or may not know this from where you're at right now is Rocky Point or Puerto Penasco is just a 4 hour drive from where I live. And I love the area down there. And my original idea was to transport it to Arizona, renovate it real quick, and then store it in Rocky Point or Puerto Penasco, Mexico. And then allow my close friends to rent it from me and then use it at my leisure when it was done. So the idea was ultimately to have a getaway down in Mexico that would potentially get me a little extra income and recover the cost of renovating the RV down there.
It's a beautiful place.
It's a beautiful spot. They're so good to us, and I love the beach down there.
So your plan is to get it renovated and hopefully store it down there and make a little money off of it, but get to enjoy it when you can. That's nice. That's lovely.
Well, my plan has changed a tidge.
Oh,
It's actually down there. Part of my journey was I started the renovating in Arizona. That's where I had it transported to. It was really fortunate that made it there in one piece because when the transportation guy got there, the right front corner was peeling off,
oh my
and he was
goodness.
kind enough to make sure it didn't fall apart coming from Iowa. You can imagine what that was like. Um, and so I started my renovation in Arizona about a year ago. Last January, I decided to get it transported down to Mexico and have some of the heavier work done down there, such as I had to have the roof replaced and the slide out switch wasn't working. And since it was ultimately going to live in Mexico, I was like, well, let me just get this down there, get some of this other harder work done that I could do, but didn't really have the time to do done. And then I would work on the rest.
Okay, well that's a pretty big project then. You've tackled quite a bit in this renovation.
Yeah, it was a complete gut except for the kitchen. I didn't take out the kitchen cabinets, the sink, the fridge, or the sink
Wow.
area, but everything else was the bed. I didn't pull out the bed, but that a lot of RVs. It's a 33-foot RV, so it had what I call the master bedroom, where
Okay.
it has the bed that flips
Yeah.
up. Then you have the storage.
So quite a bit of damage. Do you have just a rough idea of how much you spent renovating it?
I was thinking about that, and so the total cost is it's more if I include the transportation cost. So with the total transportation cost and the renovation that I've done so far is probably close to $5,000. I will tell you that one of the approaches I took with the trailer was I didn't want it to look like everybody else's RV. I wanted to have my own look to that. And I also wanted to be very frugal with the way I renovated it. I typically am like that in my everyday life. And I was like, well, let me see what I can do with this and on the cheap as best as I could. So I actually took pallet planks and cut them away from the pallets and used that for my walls. So I have a rustic pallet wall on all of the walls in my trailer.
Wow, that's cool. That's a different approach.
Yeah, it looks very cool.
That's neat, neat, neat. Now, so this was a very extensive renovation. So you probably don't have
Yes.
an easy answer for this next one, but what was your least favorite or most challenging part of the renovation?
Well, it's the most challenging and least favorite has been the slide out. Not the walls, but the floor. So there's a subfloor, and then there's the frame, and then under that is an underlayment material that in this particular trailer had extensive water damage to it. And of course, the underlayment provides the protective barrier from the elements. So get trying to understand how I could get it off, the old stuff off, and the new stuff on had was really challenging. And how do I adhere it without using the same material? Um, Fortunately, my boyfriend was able to help me with that part of it. And then right now, the other part of that's challenging is getting the slide to come in flush
Oh,
so
yes,
that
yes.
there's no potential damage from the elements coming in from the outside.
Yeah.
A week ago, we had to go down and make sure that it was flush or put a tarp on it until we could get back down there because I knew it was going to be a month before I could work on it again. And it could rain anytime. And I was like, I don't want to do all this work and put in all of this effort for us to get water in it again.
Yeah,
So we
no
made sure
kidding.
that was covered up.
No kidding. So, so after all is said and done, was there a favorite part of doing a renovation like this?
You know, it's always a journey. Anything like this can be frustrating and the labor of love all day long. What I have found to be most favorite is watching the transformation to see what it was like prior to gutting it, to seeing what it was like once I gutted it and all of the damage, and now seeing most of it coming together. And we put up a ceiling last time we were there too, and it was I took and put canvas as the ceiling, as the protectant barrier, and then um, bamboo fencing on top of that so that I could have a bamboo feel to the roof or the ceiling area of the bedroom. And then we suspended um, a bamboo ladder. And we were able to get most of the ceiling done the last time, and we'll finish it in April. But that's been my probably
Amazing.
my. I don't know. The walls are pretty cool, but the ceiling's pretty cool too.
That's amazing. All right, so let's talk a little bit about if you were having a conversation with someone that expressed interest in purchasing an RV to renovate, what tips would you give them before they ever purchased? Anything to look for?
I would say, don't do it. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, just kidding. I would say make sure that you really understand that it could be a lot more work than what you ever expect. That was one of the things that I learned is what started out was as what I expected to be a little bit of water damage turned into being a lot of water damage. Matter of fact, on all four corners of the main part of the trailer, it's a 33-foot trailer, and then one corner in the slide out, which you have to completely take out because of the black mold that it creates. So I had to completely pull that out. So my first point would be make sure that to think about worst case scenario if and are you able to move past that, because that's a challenge in and of
Yeah,
itself, is can you shake it off and forge forward.
that's right. Yeah, yeah. You've got to really want to do it if you run into those big problems. And let's if someone
Mm-hmm.
comes to you and says, I have this RV and I'm about to start renovating it. Do you have any particular tips? Like, let's say, what are your top three tips for actually renovating an RV?
I kind of touched on a little bit. Be prepared for anything. Be prepared for something to pop up that you can't plan for. It whether you're renovating a house or an RV, that can always happen. But with an RV, they're not built like houses. Really, there's a lot of staples. Be prepared for a lot of staples if you're gutting. If you're just renovating, pulling out old stuff and putting new stuff in, just making sure that you have the right size because the space is a whole lot different than your home. The other thing I would do is if you're doing a complete renovation in that you're gutting it, or even a partial gut, is to take very precise pictures of what you're pulling out. You might have to reference them. And while I took a lot of pictures, I wasn't taking precise, calculated pictures of specific areas. An example would be like my subfloor for my slide out. I wish I would have taken more specific pictures of what I took out of there rather than a shot of, look, I've pulled this out.
Yeah.
The other thing was like the slide out. I took that for granted. Like I'm like, the slide out sits flush. It should always sit flush. And then I was like, it's not sitting flush. What happened? Where did it happen? I don't know what part of the journey it stopped sitting flush.
Right.
And then the other one is just patience. Be patient with yourself, and be willing to walk away when you feel like you want to throw your hands in the air and just come back to it another day.
That's right, exactly. Yeah, great advice. You did send over a photo of some of the damage, and you touched on this earlier, so I'm going to bring up a photo of that. So right now we're looking at what looks like pretty extensive, maybe even some mold and some insulation there. Tell us a little bit about what this is and what you did to solve this problem.
Yeah, so this is the if you were standing inside the RV, and this is the slide out, so it would be the right corner of the slide out, and you can see it has a lot of water damage that did have some black mold, and what we did was pulled all of the old insulation out and took out the mold infested beams, the 2x2s that were there. You can't really see it in this picture as well, but we had to unscrew that corner from the outside of the RV to pull out the material from the inside, because it was the way RVs are made. The screws went all the way through the existing boards, so we had to get outside to pull the vinyl out so that we could see what we were dealing with. And it worked out. Actually, it ended up being a better plan than trying to do it from the inside, because we could slide the replacement 2x4 up through the outside rather than trying to push it down on the inside and then readjust it.
Yeah,
and so the far left picture is, of course, the worst damage. The middle is after we pulled out most of the bad stuff, and then of course the far right one is after we were able to get the shiplap board up. I was going to note too, one of the things that I learned on my journey is I replaced 2 electrical outlets on my own, and it was the first time I've actually replaced an electrical outlet by myself. And they're a little bit different than household ones in that the wires are tighter in that space, because you have to use a shorter box because you don't have a 2x4 frame. You have more of like a 2x2 frame, or sometimes even a 2x1. But I have a much better appreciation for the trades, especially electricians, after doing that, because it took me 45 minutes to do one, and then it took me an hour to do another one. And the reason why it took me an hour the second time is I forgot to put it in the box. So I was I'm glad this is not my day job.
Yeah. Or you'd have to get better at it. Either one.
Or I would get better at it, one of the two, yes.
Well, we can't thank you enough for coming on. Really appreciate you sharing your tips and your expertise and your experience with renovations. And thanks for popping on the virtual campground.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I'd love to share my journey.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
You too. Bye-bye.